Maybe there are. All right, so we are here to talk about the rise of auto-classification for information governance. I am Julie Colgan. This is Sandy Serkes. We'll give you kind of our bio in a second. These slides are going to keep going in and out. They should come back on their own. If they don't, raise your hand, but my peripheral vision is not completely gone yet. We have an hour and a half with you. We really hope that this session is going to be more interactive than us just talking at you. So please ask questions. If you have a story to share around a project that you've been involved in or trying to get one off the ground, please share, because we don't have all the answers. We're going to share what we know, but we love to hear from all of you as well. Okay, so these are dense learning objectives, but we'll go through them. So we're going to describe where and why auto-classification originated and the role it plays in modern IG. Identify how leading organizations now use technology like this to remove risk, adding value and control to their enterprise data. Describe how to manage structured versus unstructured data, including when they are good candidates for auto-classification, because it's not always the case. Oh, leave me hanging. I have to read this one.
Actually, while we're coming back up, can the folks in the back see Julie and I? We're both kind of short. We kind of opted to be down here on the floor with you rather than up.
We like to be part of the people.
So are you good? Can you see us? Stand up a little bit. We got a thumbs up. All right.
Oh.
This is me in heels.
Oh, I'm not wearing heels. All right, confidently discuss and sell auto-classification to drive automated business rules for retention, legal hold, remediation, migration, compliance, and more. Create and follow a game plan to handle large silos of unclassified content, following step-by-step best practices. And finally, critically evaluate your organization's IG maturity with an eye towards how auto-classification can help you improve all the things that you do. Okay, without further ado, Sandy, who are you?
Hi, I'm Sandy Serkes. I'm the president and CEO of Valora Technologies. I'm in all the way from Boston, so if there's any other Northeast folks, when we left it was 40 degrees, and here we are in lovely Southern California. My company, Valora, we make auto-classification technology, and that's why I've been asked to speak on this topic. Serving kind of the crossover between e-discovery, information governance, and records and information management. So a fair amount of important topics here today.
Great. I am Julie Colgan. My current adventure is working for a company called Epic, where I'm focusing on strategy and innovation for one of their lines of business. I've been in the information management business for longer than 18 years, but we'll just say 18 because I was 10 when I started. I am a past president and past chair of the ARMA International board. I've been also involved on at the local and regional levels for ARMA. So I've been around a long time. I've probably met a lot of you. Glad to see familiar faces and lots of new ones too. Just a show of hands, who in here is their first ARMA show?
Wow.
Welcome. So glad to have you. Like I said, we're hoping that this is collaborative. So especially for the new ones, perhaps, don't be afraid to join the conversation. So let's get started here.
You want me to take it?
You start.
All right. So just a quick show of hands. How many of you are here in your capacity? Your employer is a law firm or other professional service? Maybe a third, maybe half. And then how many are private enterprise, kind of corporate records, corporate information governance? And then how many are maybe government? Did I miss any significant sector that you identify with and I didn't say? Okay, so it's fairly evenly split. About a third. Okay, well in that case, and while that comes back up, you're gonna see the sort of obligatory picture of the person drowning in paper or files or whatever it is. And basically what Julie's flashing on there are specific client examples that either she or I have seen. And the point of this is so that you don't feel like you're alone. We're all in a sea of information. Every organization is drowning with data in at least 3 or 4 silos at the minimum, sometimes 19 or 20 at the upper end of that. Once you start thinking about email, file shares, cloud-based solutions, collaborative solutions, and then just loose data, structured and unstructured, you can see how quickly that adds up. So if that is what you are feeling in your organization, you are not alone.
Yeah, and I'll say that big pile of paper is still pretty real too, particularly for all the law firm people in the room, right? I've spent a considerable amount of my years with working directly with law firms. And so for as much as we're talking about file shares and document management systems and email servers and all of that, we still have big piles of paper and we still have to deal with them. And so there is a play around auto-classification technology and helping you move out of the physical realm to the digital realm, which we may get to in this session. If not, and you're interested in that, ask us a question or see us later. I broke it. This is going to be painful.
3, 2.
And there we go.
Okay.
You want to talk about some of these stats?
Sure. So some of these statistics are compiled from various research sources. We tried to give the source where they had them. If you've never read any of those IDC reports, you really should, because they help make the case for why what we're doing is so painful and wrong and expensive. One of my favorite ones is the last one, which is that basically about 20% of respondents said that they could find the information that they were looking for most of the time, which means that 80% of the time you cannot find it. So people are recreating it, they're doing without, they're kind of overwriting, that we're just making every mistake in the book. And there is research to back that up. And I believe you can all, either you have a copy of this or you'll be getting one, so.
The slides? Yeah.
So all those sources are noted, you can go get that stuff for yourself.
Look, I don't know how to work this clicker. You probably should take it away from me. I just wanted to say too, just while we're on this slide and talking about these statistics, you can use these numbers to turn them into something compelling for your organization. Later on the slides, we'll talk about projects and how you articulate how to sell this stuff, but I don't want to lose this. I lost it. It's comical. So if you take the actual or average salary of these people that are wasting their time searching for and then recreating information that exists, it turns into a compelling actual dollar amount. And so you can actually use that as part of your business case to justify the investment in tools like auto-classification tools or other things.
Okay,
Wow.
so I know what slide we're going to, so I'll start to describe it.
Just go ahead.
So basically, when it comes back, if you go on to the next one, what you're going to see is what a typical enterprise looks like. Law firms have their own flavor. Maybe government agencies are more similar, I think, to the corporate flavor. You're going to be doing, yeah. So you have basically your basic data silos, which pretty much have nothing to do with each other. You have email in one silo, you have your file shares, maybe you've started migrating up into Office 365, maybe you haven't, maybe you're using Box or Dropbox or some other, OneDrive, whatever you're using out there. And so data is living in all these disparate repositories, basically unaware of each other. And I would put, some of you I'm sure are using ECM systems. ECMs would fit into this category because they are somewhat protected and the data that lives within it is known, but it's not known to anything outside of it. So the kind of current state of events is that we have silos and then we have use cases. So you have all these different use cases that are saying, I need to cut across these different silos of data. Maybe I'm doing a litigation collection, maybe I'm doing an investigation. Maybe more records-oriented, I'm doing a retention analysis. I need that across all populations. So what's kind of missing here is this notion of a traffic cop in the center that is aware of all the content, aware of what it is, what it does, how long it should be kept, et cetera, and feeding that information to the use cases on demand. That is basically the setup for auto-classification. So and while that does its recycling thing, just a quick show of hands. Is there anybody here that's really not familiar with the concept of auto-classification? Do you want me to kind of give you a baseline definition? Yes? Okay. Why don't I do that before we dive into this? Okay. So auto-classification is kind of a catch-all phrase, and what it really means is performing with software rather than manually, performing an analysis of content to really answer two questions. What is this when it encounters a file? What is it? And what should I do about it? So the what is this are things like the document type, maybe the record type, and there's a distinction that we'll get into. Maybe 6, 7, 10, 20 attributes about that content. Who was it intended for? What are some keywords? What business unit might use it? Those are attributes, sometimes called metadata, not necessarily file metadata, but content metadata. So that's that first part of the what is this. And then the what do I do about this is really a disposition question that says, okay, if I can identify what it is, what action should I take? Should I retain it? Should I lock it down? Should I redact it? Should I delete it? Should I quarantine it? Should I send out a notice? There's all different kinds of actions that you can take. So very briefly, auto-classification is an automated method of determining what something is and how it should be treated. Good enough to start?
Yeah, I think, I'll add to that, if we go back to that first slide where we're, saying ridiculous amounts of email and obsolete files and contracts and all that stuff that's sitting on file shares and email servers and out in social media land and all of that, we can't today as information professionals put eyeballs on every item, right? Way back in the day when I started, a lot of what I did was paper, and I would pop the top off of a box, I would look at a file folder, I would open the folder, I would validate the papers that were in it. We can't do that anymore. The scale is out of control, and it's not going to slow down. We're constantly inventing new ways to create content willy-nilly, and so we have to have technology like this if we're going to be successful into the future. Yes,
Sure.
all right. You want to do this?
You want me to take it? Sure.
Sure.
So I'm sure you've heard these terms. We tend to divide the world into structured content and unstructured content.
I say there's a third one called semi-structured.
Maybe semi-structured, sure. So just briefly, unstructured content is content that is really not in a database or not in a formulaic format. Sometimes it's almost easier to understand structured first. I think we do that second in this presentation. So unstructured data would be something like an email. Why? Because the email could be any length, it could cover any topic, it could contain 0, 1, or a billion attachments. That's what we mean by unstructured. If you are writing a document in Microsoft Word or in PowerPoint or something like that, where you could basically be writing anything of any length, any topic, any language, that's what we mean by unstructured. And that is the bulk of the information that we have in organizations, and that's the one that's really growing. Structured content, which you can kind of see on the bottom, is data that is structured. Think of a database. It has fields, it has values, it has structure around it. So information in an Excel table would be considered structured, whereas sort of maybe the same information in a Word document would be considered unstructured. Okay?
I have a problem with Excel, though, because you can have unstructured content inside of Excel. Not so much a database. Like, databases are the true structured data in my view. I think there's more stuff here. These slides are available to you. You don't need to take pictures or write all this down, I promise. So we have structured content next, and I think we've kind of talked through a lot of this. I think one of the interesting things, though, where a lot of you have questions is around how you manage content that comes out of a structured system that is into a report that turns into unstructured content. So keeping those kinds of things in mind, for me, semi-structured is like an ECM system, right? So there's unstructured content within it, but the ECM system itself applies metadata to it, so you know more about it. It adds more discernible context to the content, but the content itself is still unstructured within the repository.
This is a really good example of structured content, because and this is, I think it was off of Barnes & Noble. And so it's basically just giving you fielded data, right? The field name is price and the field value is £7.99. So behind that is a database that is structured data. Okay.
All your builds.
Okay.
She loves slide builds.
I love slide builds.
I
They're
don't know
so
the builds,
cool.
So I'm just clicking.
So basically, one of the big things that auto-classification brings to the table is that it makes the unstructured structured. How? By adding all these attributes, which ultimately are going to become fields to accompany the content. So it's as if there was kind of a magical structure that just had to be kind of, just add water or something like that, where the structure is in the auto-classification. It creates the structure around the unstructured content.
Good. Oh, this is one of my favorites.
You go, take it.
All right, so context is king, right? You can have an email that says one thing in one context and you put it into a different, like my executive sent this email or my, janitor sent this email. could be the same words, but could be interpreted to mean very different things depending on the context of it. So this is a fun example of drawing out that exercise. So there's this puppy. I wonder if anyone would mind if I curled up under this desk and took a nap. Oh, I don't think anybody would mind. So I wonder if anyone would mind if I curled up under this desk and took a nap. Maybe his boss, I don't know. So I wonder if anyone would mind if I curled up under this desk and took a nap. I have autopilot, I have a co-pilot, it's totally cool. I wonder if anyone would mind if I curled up under this desk and took a nap. So you can see here, it's the exact same words, but with different context means very different things, evokes different emotions, different conclusions about what the author is thinking or the speaker is thinking, and could have very different consequences. So it's super important for any tools that you use to help you classify content to ensure that they're able to not only understand context that does exist, but also help you generate context that doesn't exist or that's non-permanent.
And this is one of the big questions that any auto-classification provider gets, because people instinctively understand search. So you can search for that phrase, and in this corpus, it would come up 4 times, okay? And so what's missing in just a pure play search is the context. So how do you build context with auto-classification? In addition to search, you start to have that fielded metadata, like author. Okay, author equals puppy is very different than author equals, Jones, Joseph, employee. All right, so author provides context, dates, topics, source, custodian. Geography, language, timing. All of those things provide context, and all of those become inputs to different types of business rules or disposition that say whether or not you care about or might affect the treatment of that document, not just the words, but the context.
Mm-hmm. I went ahead just in case it went to sleep, see? So now we're going to talk about rich metadata.
Okay,
Yeah.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so this kind of gets to the definition that I gave you guys earlier, that auto-classification is really 2 parts. And when we use let me just ask this, anybody involved with e-discovery, either before or currently? Okay, so you're used to a very strict notion of metadata, which is file metadata. Last modified date, last access date, things like that. Metadata actually means data about data. And when we use it here, we use it in a much, much richer context. What we literally mean is anything that could be possibly known about the file, the contents, and its context. So I didn't mention this earlier. Another place where you get context can be from the path name, right? It's very helpful to know if that path includes an employee's, personal drive, okay? So that rich metadata is essentially like a DNA sequencing or a blood test for the file, where as many attributes as possible are being captured or created and articulated and stored in essentially a database record that accompanies the file. Okay, that was a lot right there, and no picture. So that's the metadata side of it, and then
I think we have the balloons.
We have the balloons. So yeah. So these are examples of what we mean by rich metadata. So people who are familiar with e-discovery, you'll recognize that red balloon. That's the world you're used to seeing. But all the other balloons are available as typically kind of accessible or understandable fields, attributes, and context about a file. By the way, there are about 20 or 30 different ones up there just to kind of whet your appetite, but there are well over 600 fields that can be captured for a document. Really, you just have to think about what would be important in your circumstance. Are you involved with a car maker? Do you need the vehicle identification number? Do you need that maybe because that's one of the items that's listed under GDPR, if you didn't know that, as an identifying piece of data? Okay?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, oh yeah, all kinds of crazy things like VIN. So that might be something you want to look for in the event that it's in your content somewhere.
Yeah, and I'll just make a note to the hidden metadata. So it was something that I was using with a client several years ago. There's oftentimes geotagging like on images because people forget to turn that off. And by the way, if you haven't turned that off, turn it off right now. There's no reason for you to remember where you took that picture. You'll remember because you were there. So on your photograph, it will have a geolocator, and you can actually use that to map out on a map where images were taken. And so it's actually pretty frequently used in forensics and investigations. But that's also available to you. But so what if you're what if you're an insurance company, a car insurance company? Maybe that's really useful information to start to understand, well, we have more claims in this geography than we do in this geography. Because once you start to map that data on a map, you've created new intelligence about it. So thinking creatively as you start to adopt tools that can see this level of granularity within your content, being creative about which pieces of data about your data could lead to interesting insights that maybe you haven't used before.
And one thing to stress is because this is being done with software, it's relatively easy to continue to add additional fields. It's roughly the same amount of processing power and effort and thinking for the system to look at 3 fields as it is to look at 5 fields. Now, there is going to be a difference between 5 and 50, but if 1 or 2 more fields would change the game for you, it's not going to particularly impact your cost or your effort. So that's a big change to think about. If you're used to doing this manually, I'm sure you've scaled back on the fields because your users are like, please don't make us do this. Once you take that kind of out of their hands, one of my clients kind of termed it as touch-free classification. I really liked that. Once you get to that level of classification, you can start adding those things back in because it's not going to hurt anybody to do so.
Yeah, for those folks that have ECM, or particularly the law firms that have deployed document management systems, that profile screen that your users are forced to fill out and that they hate, and they just pick whatever is the easiest. So you end up with a lot of Australian anteaters because it's the first thing in the list. That's what we're trying to get rid of, right? So my mission as a records manager, I'm a certified records manager, certified IGP person. My mission in my career has been to get to this point where we can get the field out of records management. They're not records managers. We shouldn't ask them to be. They're not classifiers. They're not any of that. They are good at whatever it is they do that's not records management. So we now have the ability from a technology standpoint to scale our intelligence and apply it to content instead of asking other people to try and help us do it. Super exciting, like unicorns and purple squirrels, and it's like really super exciting stuff. Maybe I'm just a nerd like that. All right, let's talk about rules.
Okay, so the first half of that equation was the metadata piece, that attributes, that classifying. And now the rules side of the equation is the what do I do with it side. And you can think about that as disposition or action, or maybe not actually taking an action, but tagging something as if you were going to take an action, right? Everybody's nervous when we start saying defensible deletion. So you can tag something for a deletion, but not actually delete it, just kind of maybe run a report and see how much of that is actually deletable. By the way, if you're looking to build ROI, that's how you do it. Typical organization will have between 30 and 40% rot, redundant, obsolete, trivial. You guys know that term. So just storing 30 or 40% rot would probably pay for, I don't know, somewhere between 5 and 10 auto-classification systems. You really only need 1. And so that's an instant ROI right there. But so rules, once that goes away, the way they work are they're basically like if-then statements, and I'm not going to get too technical on you, but if certain conditions are met, then certain actions or certain tags take place. So what I'm showing up here is a retention rule, and you can see the interplay between the fielded data, that attribute data, and the rule data. So document type and date are both italicized. So what it says when it comes back up is if the document type is a contract, and if the date is less, let's say the effective date is less than a certain point, then we want to go ahead and keep that active. Okay? So note the difference on that retention rule versus, I don't know what it is, I don't care, I'm never going to look at it, but if it hits 90 days, throw it out. You see the sophistication that's available here? I'm sure, I mean, I know lots of people have that as their policy, 90 days and it's out, or 6 years to the letter and it's out. This is a much more intelligent way to do it because it's weighting the value of the content in the file and the context before just making an arbitrary decision. So it's a lot of levers that you have to play with that you probably didn't have before.
And I'll share a story real quick, if you don't mind. So I had a client a few years ago who was investing in some technology like this to do, which we'll talk about later, search and rescue. So he wanted to go and find records out in the wild, records on file shares, records in SharePoint that needed to get under management. And so that was the basis for the investment, or at least for the POC. And so we ran the POC, and it turns out he had over 30% exact duplication on his file shares. Exact duplicates. These aren't near dupes. These are the exact same piece of content. 30% of his 41 terabytes of file share data was exact dupes. And so quickly that business case changed, and the way we started the project was not about record keeping, it was about getting rid of all this e-trash, is what my friend Brian Timler calls it, because it was really compelling. They're an insurance company that are constantly in litigation. They actually had an active class action litigation. Being able to, even if they, to Sandy's point, didn't actually delete it at that moment, they could identify it and they could get it out of the way. One of the things about exact duplication, though, and distribution across file shares is if you, depends on how you're architected on your file shares, but if those file shares represent multiple departments, there could be collaboration reasons or breakdowns within your organization of why there's all this content duplicated around your organization. So for example, say marketing creates a video, and so marketing is the office of record for the video, but sales keeps a copy of it because it's easier for them to access their stuff. That's the legitimate use for duplicating the content. Now maybe there's a better way as information managers and information governance professionals to help them share the same content, but before you just kind of, just blow away all of that duplicated content, you should think about it. But it certainly was a compelling reason for this organization to say, hey, if there is technology that can help us open our eyes to our content in a meaningful way like this, we need to do it.
Before you move ahead, one other important point about this structure of utilizing rules, you probably saw a bunch of different use cases up there. One of the big things that AutoClassification brings to the table is that you don't have to pick one. We're going to do a ROT initiative, or we're going to do a retention initiative, or we're going to do a migration, or a data privacy. You can kind of do all of them, just like it's relatively low impact to look for 3 fields as it is to look for 5 fields. It's the same low impact to classify for ROT and retention and privacy and litigation and everything else, as long as you're in there processing.
Yeah, we always said while the hood's up,
right,
you may as well. Right? If you're going to start poking at data, interrogating it at any detailed level, ask all the questions you want to ask of it and get your answers. You may still need to go back. I mean, let me tell you, it's an iterative process for sure. But while you're in there, if you know that you want to understand your level of exact duplication, near duplication, obsolescence of files based on dates, and then some key records classification terms or things like that, why not? While the hood's up. Shall I move on?
Sure.
Oh, this is a fun one.
This is going to be great with it going on and off. All right, so now that you understand sort of conceptually what it is and what you get, here's how AutoClassification works. So basically and we are talking about software, in case anybody missed that memo. It is software that is using the text of files. So one way or another it has to get to text. If they're native files, it'll do a text extraction, similar to eDiscovery, if you know how that works. If they're scanned images, we use OCR. Most of you probably know OCR. And then there are a couple other files that also can be made into text. So audio or video, if you run them through a speech-to-text engine, boom, you have text. So this is a text analytics approach. And as soon as you can get to text, and by the way, it doesn't always have to be English text either. It can work in a lot of native languages. For those that are what we call the double byte languages, kanji, Japanese, Arabic, those will usually get auto-translated to English and then run in English, although there are libraries that will support native languages. So once we get to text, then the fun begins. Then we can start that tagging step, that blood test, that DNA sequencing step that's going to result in as many fielded pieces of data as you care to capture. And then the rules engine is the last piece to run that says, okay, I have this text base, I have these tags, essentially. Now I get to manipulate them in statistical ways to accomplish different things.
So when I think about this, you had said earlier 2 steps, kind of what is it, what do I do with it? To me, there's 3 steps as a records manager. One is, what is it? Like, is it a email? Is it a Excel spreadsheet? What is it? And then what does it mean to me? Now that I know what it is, what does it mean to me? And that's really where you take into consideration the context around the thing. And then now when I know what it is and what it means to me, then I can decide what I should do about it. And that's where the application of rules come in. So to me, this is, whenever I talk about it, this is exactly the 3 steps. Now, your mileage will vary among different products around all 3 of these capabilities. So as practitioners, part of your responsibility in investigating these types of technology for application in your organization is to understand what's most important to you in those areas and where you can live without some of these capabilities, or maybe it's a cost question or a time question or a hardware question or whatever it might be. But these are the 3 major categories of things any auto-classification technology ought to be able to do with a certain level of competence. They'll just go about it potentially a little bit differently.
Okay. So now we'll kind of show you what it really looks like.
Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe, it's my favorite law firm.
Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. So this is for the law firm folks, but not entirely. So basically, one of the things that folks in law firms are always trying to do is classify by matter number, or what we call matter centricity, if you've heard that. So they're trying to get content into their DMS that is related to a matter number so that it can be organized in that fashion. It's essentially a simple taxonomy. And so when an auto-classification engine comes across, there's some clicking, Julie.
Okay.
comes across
I don't want to do it
something
too early.
like this. Basically, it's going to go through and start that blood testing or that DNA sequencing and pulling out all different pieces of data. Some of it's given with the file. In an email, we do get some structured data, but not a ton. Of course, you can see that kind of critical content. Well,
No,
maybe you can see it. It had the name of the matter and the matter number, which is, of course, the dead ringer that says, aha, this is how you file me. Now, this was there she goes. So the orange on the right is meant to represent that tagging step, that first, or maybe in Julie's case, second step. And then the blue is the rules engine that's going ahead and saying, okay, this is where that should be filed. This is its classification. And you may have 6 other things, and therefore, this is how long we need to keep it, and what kind of sensitivity has, and so on and so forth.
That's a popular one, by the way, for auto-classification. So I know many of you are probably looking at this from a retention and disposition standpoint, but I'm seeing more and more clients interested in this type of technology for classification for security purposes, protection of sensitive data, GDPR related or not. Security has the blank check that eDiscovery used to have. And so there's a lot of investment going on around technologies that can help organizations better manage sensitive information, particularly for law firms who are custodians of their clients' arguably most sensitive data, and you willingly accept it and hold on to it and hug it and love it and keep it forever. These kinds of technologies are really important to consider in order for you to meet your ethical obligations to protect your client's interests. Not to scare you.
Okay, so here's well, we have 1 arrow out of order, sorry. So here's a classic example of rot. Maybe your spam filter caught it, maybe it didn't. I have a whole presentation just on rot, and every single example in it is from my email. And believe me, I have every spam filter known to mankind, and I purposely bring out all the ones that got through. This is one of them. And so what you have here, how does a software system know that this is junk? How do you know that? Look at it. You know instantly, oh God, rot, right? Well, the software has been programmed to notice the same kind of thing. So first of all, a watch list. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, It's a Boy, Mazel Tov. All of these things are on the watch list because the chances that they're going to have any kind of regulatory or business value are so slim that they're on the watch list. Okay, so that's immediately a red flag. Looking at the date, right? 2014, we're coming up on almost 4 years ago. So automatically looking at, now that's a content-based date, not a creation date, not an access date, although those are also fair game. Some of the other things that will come up when that comes back would be not a whole lot of content compared to the amount of graphics. It's Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. There's about 7 or 8 total words in this file compared to however many graphics, what we would call a very poor signal to noise ratio. And then finally, what Julie was saying, 4,000 identical, that's hash match identical copies throughout the organization. What does this tell you? It says with a statistically viable likelihood that it's rot. There we go. That's the rule when you go like this.
Right.
And so that's one way to detect rot. There's also programmatic rot. I mean, you guys are used to this, temporary files, internet files, things like that. But this is a content-based
System
rot.
alerts. Talk to your IT department. They get them all day long in email, and they just pile up. They don't delete them. They're just like, okay, well, I got an alert from this thing that says it's backed up, or it didn't, or it's starting again. And they see it come through, and they often just pile up. So it's an interesting place to try kind of a test of these technologies sometimes, especially if you sit in IT and have access to that stuff. You can see, whoa, we have thousands and thousands of these things just sitting in the email server for no reason.
Okay, so here's a more sophisticated example. So rot, okay, everybody understands that one
I'm just
instinctively.
going to click through in case
Yeah,
this
go
thing
ahead.
dies again.
So this is essentially, first of all, identifying that a document is a contract.
I went too far.
And then secondly, figuring out often what type of contract, what are the key clauses. You might want to compare them against each other or against some other. One of the things that AutoClassification is lately being used for is for comparison of content between silos. So maybe you have your contracts over here and your email over here. Can we identify conversation threads that are related to the contracts and bring that information together? Typically we can if we have some sort of contract number or dates or clauses that are linking that kind of stuff together. So that's getting very sophisticated, a little bit beyond your typical RIM use. But again, if you guys are looking to build your value and gain consensus for these type of technologies, a way to bring in marketing onto your side with stuff like that. So you can see here, I mean, and these are just examples. It can, you capture what is germane to your world off of contracts or off of, this is a perfect example of unstructured content. It's like the quintessential example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so to me, when we started out on the technology side and trying to apply it to records management years ago, all we had available were the properties, right? Whatever metadata came with the file, that's what I got. And I had to trust it, and it was what it is. But the advancement here, and it's so super important, is creating metadata out of unstructured content. The creativity that you can use as professionals and as subject matter experts in the business that you're in is unlimited to create new value for your organization and be able to classify things like this. And even create templates, right? So I had a client who was doing contract management, was on the list for the year, and so they were gonna invest in a contract management system, and that's fine, well and good for all the new stuff. But what about the thousands and thousands of contracts that already existed in the organization? How do we get those things in there? So you can use technology like an auto-classification technology to help you get those things into a contract management system and get them under management with all the rest of the stuff that you have.
And just a reminder, it works on scanned paper. So a lot of our contracts from, let's say, maybe prior to 1995 or so are going to be on scanned paper. I don't know, the older folks in the room probably remember we would create a beautiful electronic document, print it out, sign it, and fax it. And
Anybody still do that?
Anybody still do? Please don't be still doing that.
It's okay, we don't judge.
So, but that contract could very much still be enforced depending on what it was for, or certainly still be in records. So the fact that essentially, a strong auto-classification system will work pretty seamlessly, whether it was on electronic data or paper data. One of the nice things that you can do too is find that pairing. If you have one scanned copy here and then maybe a later one or a revision or something, bring those together. What we call like a dupe group. Bring them together because they're the same content.
Yeah, near duplication is an interesting concept. I don't know if we're going to touch on it in this
Go ahead.
presentation or not, but in the organizations that I've worked with, probably the same for yours, nobody ever gets it right first. So there's versions of things. And a lot of versions represent a lot of the junk in your systems. So having a tool that can help you understand a hash-based exact duplicate versus a piece of content that is materially similar to another piece of content based on mathematical algorithms, the size, length, whatever it might be, however you decide to define what a near dupe is really important, because depending on what the content is, you might want to keep them all. You might want to keep all the versions because you have some reason for a client to want to be able to see the versions or something like that. And other times you don't need to keep all the versions. Once you have the final, it's been printed out and signed and rescanned in again and then put into your contract management system through an auto-classification tool. You don't need to keep all the other versions. Yeah.
Those scans, sometimes old documents, so hard to make a scan with an OCR. Just scan it as an image to capture the content.
Exactly.
So, yeah, you can just scan to image and then run OCR in the system rather than OCRing at the scan machine. Depends on what kind of scanner you have, the quality, OCR technology.
I'll take that one. Yeah. So the question is basically how do you get from scan or from photo to text? So OCR is the answer. Pretty much anything that has discernible letters to an OCR engine is fair game.
It's gotten a lot better
high
over the
quality,
years.
a high quality photo would work. Or scanning. If you're going to be scanning and you're looking at things like this, my strong recommendation is 300 or 400 DPI. Do not cheap out and do 150 DPI. You are not doing anybody any favors. Okay, it's just not that much of more either processing or expense, but it makes a huge difference to engines to have that extra DPI to play with.
So I kind of have a thought to our question, I guess. I think one of the things for where I work with contracts is attaching the child documents to the adults. You know, you have a contract that you originated in 2005, and you have 1,000, well, not 1,000, you have a lot of amendments, you have riders that gets auto-renewed, whatever. And so the idea of being able to find the children, because you have to have all those before you can do deletion.
That's exactly
I mean,
right.
to me, that's sort of the other critical pieces. Before I can say, yes, this contract can go away, if I don't have all the kids lined up
Right.
to know I can. And so it's just very interesting. I hadn't thought of, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Number one, near duplicate use, not exact duplicate. We all know what exact duplicates are used to cull things out. But the number one near duplicate use is to find documents that are at once in the Word version and the PDF version of the exact same document. Those will not hash match. Okay, they're going to be just because Adobe and Microsoft do it differently. In fact, Adobe is well known to be different. Everybody in here's got a different version of PDF, I guarantee it. I can mail you all the same file and it will all render differently. And so identifying those things and figuring out, do I need one or both of those or certain circumstances? So that's the number one near dupe use.
Exactly right. Okay, so I'll take this one to start, and then you can pick on your favorites. But there are a million gazillion different applications for this kind of technology. Here's 10 of them, plus one. My favorites and the things that I see my clients working on right now or planning to work on in the coming year or two is security. And then some migration. There's still a lot of migration activity. Like I said, I work with a lot of law firms, and there are a lot of law firms who have finally decided that the big, expensive real estate is more than it needs. So there's a lot of downsizing happening, a lot of moving and downsizing. And so as part of that initiative, there's content that needs to move off-site, on-prem, to some sort of cloud repository or shared repository in another location. So particularly with cloud migrations, the economics of cloud are often very different than they are on-prem. Oftentimes with cloud, you pay by the drink, unless you're a huge organization and can afford the enterprise level. So when you pay by the drink, you don't want to pay for that 2014 holiday card. Why would you want to move that into the cloud and then have to pay to store it when it means absolutely nothing to you? Not one thing. Why would you move all those emails that you should have deleted after 90 days according to your policy, but you didn't because somebody was allowed to hide them somewhere? Why would you move those? Because now they're risk to you. You should clean those things up, ideally, before you migrate. So migration is a fantastic use case. Security is the other one. It's great for us to be able to classify content for information lifecycle reasons, but this kind of, while we have it, we have an obligation, oftentimes from some sort of significant regulation or law, to know what it is and to protect it, actively protect it. And in order to do that, again, you have to know what the heck it is and what it means to you in the context of your business. So if you're a business that doesn't work with anybody outside of the US, nobody in the EU, then GDPR doesn't apply, but HIPAA does. So you certainly need to know if this has personally identifiable information in it, and you have an obligation to protect it. So to me, those are just two huge, huge, huge use cases that I've not seen my clients have a lot of difficulty getting funding around, or at least to explore it in a POC kind of context.
I have one more from that list. It will be on the upper right, which is what we call orphan data. So if you are at a law firm and it's a bunch of laterals, you either gained them or lost them. There's the mystery content that you have to deal with. If you're in a corporate example, it's that M&A you did and you inherited all the data but none of the people. And so now you have this kind of unknown data silos. What do you do with this? A good example for that, I didn't mention this already, is the automatic detection of legal hold. That would be another one to add to the litany of everything that you should be doing with data. If you're inheriting data from another source, you need to figure out what it is, what you can safely dispose of, and what you need to keep under legal hold. If that didn't come along for the ride with whatever negotiations, you're going to need to start from scratch on that.
And does anybody have a use case that's not on that list that you can't see? No? Kind of hitting, this is what Sandy and I have been around this block a lot of times. So these are the things that we tend to hear are the most common use cases. But if you don't want to share, you're not comfortable sharing in the big group, but you have a novel use case, I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah.
Because I geek out on this stuff all day. So does Sandy.
Well, I kind of guess I think
Okay.
that restoring documents.
Oh wait, hold on.
Yeah.
I have a
mean,
microphone
guess
for you.
I do think, I don't really see it up there, but
Yeah, the idea of using it to actually restore a document, a whole set, is actually a use case. I mean, we can't destroy some stuff because we actually, so that is separate. It's not about finding duplicates, but it's about saying, I need to actually put this puzzle back together. Because when I see the whole picture, I know what I can do with it. And I think that it's maybe a subset, I don't know, it's a call, but it is just
Possibly
a different.
under remediation, but yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Overall file organization.
anyway, just that idea of that puzzle coming back together, I think, I don't know, our puzzle's got a few pieces.
Her puzzle has a few pieces missing, just saying. I have 3 kids, 4 dogs and a cat. We have never had all the puzzle pieces.
Some from other puzzles.
Right, some from other puzzles. I buy them at garage sales, so I don't have a big investment. All right, let's move on here. Okay, you want to start here?
Okay. This was essentially going into a little bit of a deeper dive on rules. Just to mention where these slides came from, Julie and I earlier this year did a 5-part webinar series on auto-classification. It's out there on YouTube. You're welcome to watch that at your leisure.
It doesn't blink?
It doesn't do this. And so some of these slides have been pulled from that. This is a deeper dive on rules. We've kind of covered rules pretty well. I think we can
At a high level. Let's see where this leads us. Oh,
Here you go.
okay. So this is a good slide. So this is my search and rescue versus seek and destroy. Any Metallica fans in here? That's my favorite band. Seek and destroy, man. All right. So search and rescue. You have 2 kinds of use cases when you're using this kind of technology. You're either going out into your wild, wild west to find something and rescue it and get it under management and protect it, or you're going out and looking for things that should not be there to blow them away. That's it. So when you're thinking about investing in this kind of technology, understand which kind of use case is most important to you, or where do you want to start? Because they're different, and the way you would articulate the value is going to be different, and the way you would interrogate the data would be different. What are you really attempting to do? Do you just want to go and find risky stuff and make it not risky, encrypt it? And so at the end of the day, you're, oh, look, I'm just making things go.
That's it, you lost your privileges.
I've been cut off from the clicker. Are you trying to make a material dent in the cost of your storage by getting rid of duplicates? Whoa, okay. Are you trying to improve your compliance posture with your regulators by improving your records management capabilities? Or it could be any number of these things, but just being thoughtful about that, because I've seen clients kind of go into this blindly without a particular direction. Although sometimes that works, I will say. I had one client who had no idea what they knew, what they didn't know about their data, and so we just threw the technology at it, and then all of a sudden the data told them stories they didn't want to hear. So sometimes it's okay to start there, but generally you should know where you're headed and what you're trying to get out of it. Oh my goodness.
One thing that I will add to that is if you are on a seek and destroy mission, do share that with your user base, because people get really, really flipped out that that data is going to disappear. I thought there was an excellent mention on this topic at one of the ones I sat on early, one of the sessions I sat in earlier, where they sort of made an interim category and said, well, we won't delete this yet. We'll just kind of hang on to it for as long as needed. Those are some excellent real world tricks. Another one that's in that boat that I'll share with you is sequestering. So instead of literally deleting, search and destroy, search and sequester for a little while. We're just going to put these over here. Nobody's going to see them. You can't find them. They won't show up in a search, but they're not gone. If you really, really need it, come and see me. It reminds me what we did with my son's pacifier when we just we were done, and we sort of hit it. And if he asked for it, we're like, oh, it's right here. But he stopped asking, and that was it. Okay, so that's the pacifier sequester trick. For handling
That's the same
deletion.
thing my client did with those duplicates, right? So when he told the executives, we're going to get rid of these duplicates, they're exact duplicates we really don't need, we don't need them. We've looked into where they came from and who was holding on to them. We've determined we don't need them. And they said, yeah, but no, we can't delete them. That's terrifying. I can't do it. We have litigation. What if that gets us in trouble? The business might actually have a reason that you haven't thought of to need it. And so they just quarantined it. They just moved it. But they told people that it went away or that it was going away, and they waited for people to scream about it. Turns out nobody screamed about it. They still had to hold on to it because they were under class action lawsuit. But anyway. All right, so wait, go back 1 second.
Oh, sorry.
I wasn't quite done. Important to understand when to be inclusive, exclusive, or mutually exclusive, particularly with dates. You have property level dates, and then you have content dates. So as you're looking at a project that you want to take on, start looking at the types of information you want to pull out and use for analysis to then apply rules to it, and make sure like all dates or just last modified date, or just last modified date but not create date. There are all kinds of ways that you can kind of think about different data elements that are available to you, and being thoughtful up front. To Sandy's point, do it all while you have the hood up, but don't do it all literally if you don't need to know all of it, because it does add time and processing resources to it. And where is it found? What kind of stuff does it have already available to you? What kinds of information do you need to know about the content that doesn't exist that you have to get out of the content? Where is it sitting? So from if it's in a file share, what is that hierarchical structure? Does that tell you something about what it is? What else?
Well, one thing I was going to add is sometimes people are a little bit nervous about auto classification, and it's the auto part of that statement that they're worried about. So something you should know is that you can always roll it back. That's a nice thing about using software instead of people. You can literally, every run or every action that's taken is logged. And if something came out a way that you didn't quite expect or whatever, you can always roll that back. So don't be afraid to kind of experiment. Julie mentioned that it's iterative. That's a very good way to think about it. And you probably will tweak it a little bit till you get exactly what you want. And then a year from now, you might tweak it again because things will have changed. So don't be afraid of the auto side of auto classification. It's still very much being directed by you all.
Well, that's the point, right? So it is taking the 80% of the 80% that you frankly don't need to put your eyeballs on because it's straightforward stuff and a computer can do it. And it's bubbling up for you, ambiguity, it just went away, ambiguity, and things like that for you to deal with. But you're only having to look at that 20% of the 20%, not all of it yourself. So super important for us as information professionals to be efficient with our skills, because I don't know anybody in here has a fully formed team underneath them, a healthy budget every year. What you ask for, you get. Does anybody have that? Not a one. Crickets, right?
If they do, they're not going to tell you.
Right. But in my experience, 20 years doing this, I've never had all the things I asked for. And so we have to be creative in how we leverage our expertise and get things done. And the more we can do that, the more we tend to keep our jobs. So that's really the point of auto classification, is not to just do it for you, but to make you be better at what you do.
All right. So this is a little bit of a deep dive on rules again.
30 minutes.
How much?
30 minutes.
30, all right. So I'm just going to kind of explain different kinds of rules that are out there. If you are a rule god or goddess and you want to make the world's most complex rules, God bless, you can do that. But just as a rough way of thinking about it, there are simple rules, which are over on the left, what we call bucket rules, where you're essentially allocating content into different buckets that are relatively simplistic across the board, like geographic or business unit or use case. Has PII, yes, no, that kind of thing. That's the easiest way to get started. If you do have a full-on taxonomy and you have 4,700 endnodes, as one of my clients did, you can literally build auto classification to support that. It may take a little while. Not something that we recommend, but certainly something that can be supported as rich and as detailed as you want to go. And then the third one, I just want to mention to you guys, because everybody's all like, ooh, AI, machine learning. This is where that comes into play. Because what's happening here is that, again, a sophisticated auto classification system has something what we call guidance or input. So it has the target data, that's the data it's trying to analyze. It often has a destination where it's going to put it or putting those tags. But then there's a kind of another layer, which is a guidance system. So guidance systems might be like an ERP system, a billing system. Sometimes people have almost like an address book. And so those are systems that an auto classification engine is either going to have connectivity with or is going to query for up-to-the-date information. So I'll give you an example. Let's say one of the fields that you want to classify is employee name, or if you're in a law firm, associate name. Okay, so you're looking for who is affiliated with this content. If you want that to be up to date, you would have the auto classification system query your employee database, because every morning somebody's been terminated, somebody's been hired. So rather than you having to keep current with who exactly is an employee today, have the system take care of itself. It'll go ahead and query the ERP or whatever it is it's going to query. It'll be up to date, and it can auto redo its rules. How cool is that? And then it's in sync with the business. It's not on you to stay in sync, it's on the system to do it.
Does anybody currently have a process that you manage manually like that? Where yeah, I'm not surprised. I know I did when I was a practitioner in-house, where I'd have to go to, in a law firm, for example, I'd have to go to accounting, hey, can I get the latest client matter list so I can update my records management system, because they didn't talk. They didn't connect, and I couldn't wait. So, because now the lawyer is open to file and I need to create a physical folder, couldn't wait. So manual processes are the target for this, and it's amazing the accuracy you can get out of using guidance systems on your auto classification workflow.
Oh God, all right. I didn't realize we had this in there.
heavy.
If you liked rules so far, we'll just do this lightly. Here's a little bit how it works. So here's sort of a retention and destruction policy, typical, in this case for Stark Industries. And here's what the rules look like when they're all done out. Now, again, you can do those by hand, or remember what these things do for a living. They parse documents and pull data out. So how trivial is it to essentially create a rule automatically from a nicely formatted, structured document like this one, and we'll go ahead and generate those rules automatically. All right. Okay. As ARMA asks us to give you very practical things to take home with you, and unless you're going to take Julie and me home with you, we try
love to go.
Yeah, especially if you live here, I'm ready. These are some of the practical steps. I don't know, Julie, you want to take this one?
Sure. So, you know, kind of along the lines of the previous slide that I was talking about, the search and rescue and seek and destroy, measuring success is something that I've experienced not being very good at as an early records manager growing up. Measuring success needs to be objective measurements, not subjective, like we're better at compliance. What does that mean? Because executives don't really care, and because if you can't quantify it in a way that's meaningful for the business, they're not going to continue to invest in whatever you're asking them to. So making sure that you understand if we want to get rid of duplication or rot in our environment, that you're able to articulate a cost or some sort of tangible benefit to the organization for doing so. I will say too, I learned this several years ago where I was pitching to the executive team and said, hey, we're going to get rid of all this stuff and we're going to see an annual savings of X dollars by getting rid of it. And so then the CFO said, yeah, you only get to claim that once. Once I stop paying for it as an expense, you don't save me any more money. So it's just the 1 year of savings. So just a little tidbit there for you. How long do we have to implement this project? How long will it take? Do we need to go fast? Can we go slow? What are the implications for our business? So is this related to litigation where we have a limited time period, or an upcoming audit from a regulator where we need to get through it really fast? Or for the law firms, we have a client coming in doing a security audit? Or is this, kind of more of a hygiene project where we have time, we don't have to go super fast? Because there will be implications, frankly, on the hardware side of deploying a software like this. The faster you want to go, the more hardware you're going to need. And so depending on your organization and how you deploy hardware, that could be a material thing to consider. What budget?
Can I pick up on something?
Sure.
So this is something that's recently come about, is this notion of what I'll call dynamic scaling. And as these solutions move more and more into the cloud and they're using cloud infrastructure, you can take advantage of that and have essentially your solution increase and decrease on demand. So if you're suddenly going to pound through a large department, or you're bringing another system online, boom, you can scale up. And once you've gotten through that, or your kind of change rate goes down, you can scale back down. So all the major cloud providers support that type of business model anyway. Again, a sophisticated auto classification engine should be able to take advantage of that fluctuating, that what we call dynamic scaling for processing.
But understand too from the technology that you're looking at if there are licensing implications on that scale too. So just because from a technical standpoint it can do it, does the vendor support your ability to take advantage of that? Just being real. Yeah. So who are the stakeholders? What do they care about? And we're repeating ourselves, but it's probably important. How are we going to measure success? Because I'm going to tell you, I see a lot of clients skip this step. They just want to do it. There's an emotional attachment to it. They're scared about litigation or an audit, or they are trying to save money desperately so they don't have to do a round of layoffs or something like that. So what will this look like? If we're successful, what we're trying to do with this investment, what will success look like?
Oh, there was more. Sorry.
This is why I don't like builds. I'm always surprised.
It's a backwards build.
So yeah, some other things to consider, and it will have impact on like timeline, for example. How much data are we talking about? I have 6 months to get this project done. Oh, I have 3 petabytes? Not gonna happen. Not gonna happen. So, you know, understanding also what condition your source data is in. Is it clean? Is it organized? Is it neat? Or is it just a big jumble of you don't know what it is, images that don't have already text, and so you can't really just do kind of an interrogation to understand at a high level what it is. Do you have paper? Is it just electronic? Is it a hybrid environment? How old is the stuff? What kind of languages are represented? What kind of quality do I need out of the auto classification workflow? Is it 80% good, 87%, 97%, 50%? And again, it depends on your use case. If this is based on litigation or regulatory audit or something like that, you're gonna want really precise classification, whereas it's more of a routine records information management use case. You have a bit more flexibility there. You probably don't have to have the same level of accuracy as you would in a litigation or an investigation or an audit. This is for you.
This one's for me?
It's for you.
Okay. Oh, I see. This is a redo of something I'm used to seeing differently. So basically, this is because we were a little bit crunched for format. Follow the arrows, or not. Where basically we were trying to walk you through what is a typical project. I'll just speak to it. So if you are, contemplating something like this, prepare for yourself about 2 to 3 months to do a first pilot project. That's generally what they take. And basically what you're going to do is kind of get everybody on board, get the okay. And then you're going to work with your vendor. What I would recommend that you do is look for a group that is already kind of predisposed to work on this. Maybe it's the records group itself. Maybe it's legal. Maybe it's some other group that has an interest in getting this off the ground. And start with their documents. What we would basically kind of look for like an internal champion. This is a little bit specific to Valora. I apologize for that. But basically,
Powerhouse. It's a
yeah,
Valora
so those are some of our product names and things, so I apologize. But basically, look for setting up what we call a sandbox scenario. So a sandbox is a working version of the software that's not live. And it's a place where you can tweak and play and set up, maybe set up dummy email boxes, set up dummy files, maybe a dummy SharePoint if you're using that. And all of that is so that you're not, immediately impacting live files. Because you definitely want to test this out. As we said, it's iterative. There's going to be tweaking. There's going to be things you didn't think of. So having a sandbox environment is a very safe, smart way to do that. And you can absolutely put a sandbox in the cloud or behind your firewall. These are fairly straightforward things. Once you've nailed the sandbox environment, that's when you'd begin to port over to live. And again, you're going to take that step by step. You're not just going to unleash it and let it crawl, your main file share. So again, you want to sort of look for not just the technology, but a vendor that's been kind of down the path a little bit before. And then you're going to go through, once it's kind of set up and running, it's going to go through and do all those, what we saw, the text and the tagging and the rules. And then potentially it's going to either export out to a repository if that's where things are going, or to a data visualization engine. We didn't even get into that here. But one of the things that AutoClassification sets up is all kinds of fabulous data visualization. Because all those pieces of data can be presented in charts and graphs and all kinds of fun ways to data mine and subset with just a couple of mouse clicks. So depending on where you're going with that information, all of that these are the steps that you're going to kind of participate in one way or another. All right. Okay, this one's you, Julie.
Oh, well, okay. Let me do a time check here.
About 20
minutes, okay. All right, so anybody in here deal with mergers and acquisitions? A handful. I have a client right now that is a major corporation merging with another one, and then once they come together, they're going to split into 3. It's going to be a fun project. Typically when you merge with an organization or you acquire an organization or part of one, you get this stuff that is loosely defined. And I don't know about the M&A activities you've been involved in, but the ones I've been involved in, there are usually, I don't know, 3 or 4 things that are super important to get done, like the financial system, the HR system, so people can get paid, and then whatever the core product is, that the reason that you came together or bought the company. So those 3 things usually get done, and then there's the rest of this stuff that isn't often dealt with well and often set to the side during the kind of 1 to 2 year assimilation process. And then eventually, the records manager in the organization is like, I need to clean this stuff up, right? You have to manage what's coming in, you have to merge it with your existing stuff. There's a mix of file types, records, files, email, work product, whatever. Priority is also an interesting challenge to try and solve for. When you don't know what all this stuff is that's coming in, trying to identify, you know, where do I start? If we know that we've already worked on our financials and our people and our product manufacturing or whatever it is, we still have marketing and sales and technology and accounting and whatever other things that haven't been touched yet. So what's important to us, whether it's a particular department, a custodial group, because we are maybe exposed to certain kinds of litigation, maybe employment law, I don't know, or a particular business area, looking at impactful areas, sales, HR, accounting, as well as immediate focus for litigation, investigation, regulatory, audit. So just some challenges that I've seen around dealing with M&A, where the application of auto-classification technology can help you answer these questions pretty quickly. You can start to get an understanding of what is this stuff that I've now just accepted, what kinds of work does it represent, what kinds of legal, operational, or ethical obligations do I have related to this content, and then sets of priorities to remediate it. Oh, we have more of this. Yeah, so that's exactly what I was just talking about. So it's early case assessment for the e-discovery people in the room, or triaging for those who like MASH. You ever like that show? So this is kind of early identify, like big chunks, what is it? At a high level, I don't need super granular detail about it yet. I just need to know kind of what this is so I can put it into a bucket. Is this important stuff, not important stuff, stuff I'm not really sure it might be important, so I need to look at it further. Then we do a second pass on everything else using things like file names, path names, retention schedules, reference data, other things to help you understand really what this stuff is. And how you can then classify it. And then you can apply true classification to the content based on whatever your classification system is. I mean, typically your retention schedule.
One thing that you might want to do, again, because when people put in systems like this or they're running a pilot, everybody knows that it runs pretty quickly, so they want to see results quickly. So part of what we were looking to do is like what's kind of quick and easy to do. Identifying rot you can do in like 5 seconds. So, you know, that's just a great sort of success factor to show very early. When we are working with a client, we usually divide things into 2 showcases, showcase 1 and showcase 2. So showcase 1 are easy, quick things. They're either quick to run or easy to understand conceptually for everybody, or both. So we kind of start with that, and then showcase 2 is the fancier. That's where we'll get into things like, oh, look how this has 16 levels of PII and auto redaction, and you know, then we just go nuts. But that's once you've kind of graduated to the harder stuff. Okay. We're coming to the end. The idea was basically, you know, often when Julie or I or both of us, we talk with folks, they're like, oh my God, this is awesome, we love it. How am I gonna sell this internally? So we wanted you guys to walk away with our tricks for doing that. We've talked about most of these. Certainly finding a champion. For those of you in records, you might not realize this, but your champion may very well be in legal. If you don't already report up through that organization, look for somebody who's responsible for compliance, maybe e-discovery, IG, if that's a title in your organization and not you. You're gonna find
Security.
that friend.
Go talk to your CISO if you have one, or CISO, whatever you call them.
Yeah, you're gonna find that friend in legal. Use a use case, and this is kind of key, that scales and has impact but is not catastrophic.
I love that. When I saw that on the slide, I'm like, I like that.
Well,
I'll
and
use
I'll
that
give you an
more.
example of something that sounds great but turned out to be catastrophic, which this was for a law firm. In the first place they wanted to start with was email. Seems pretty straightforward, a good candidate for auto-classification, until some of the partners realized that auto-classification was going to determine how their email was going to be classified, and they were not okay with that. And none of us, not us or the folks we were working with, which included the CIO, were prepared for that kind of political backlash of looking at people's content. That's why I said earlier, if you're going to be talking about seek and destroy, have that conversation early. So watch out for things that sometimes have a touch point that you might not have seen coming. We talked about starting with a pilot. It's an excellent one because usually it's low cost. Two, because usually you can carry over what you've done from that into the full execution. And three, it's an excellent opportunity to benchmark what you really need. Julie alluded to this earlier. Do you have, 600 terabytes that you need to get done in 2 months? That's one level of system. Or do you have, 20 terabytes that can get done in the next 2 years? Very different structure. So a pilot will let you benchmark that and kind of really determine what your ultimate systems should look like. And then I really like this one about let the data tell you what to do. You may know a lot about what you have, and you may have a really good idea. I guarantee you, no matter what you know, there will be a surprise when you start auto-classifying. It's just the nature of the beast. But again, it will kind of suggest things to you. I'll give you an example. We were going through a client's data population, and we found about a quarter of their documents were in Russian. They had no idea. We're not really sure how that happened or when it happened, but that was the case. And
Fake news.
yeah, surprise. And so we had to add in the Russian to English auto translation for them, because what else were they going to do?
Well, it's the same thing that happened with my client, right? So my client was wanting to do this search and rescue record stuff, and then it turned out the data told him a totally different story. But it was just as compelling for the business and just as important. So even if you don't know what you don't know about your data, but this kind of technology, like there's something in your gut that's telling you something is not quite right, but you don't know what it is, so you don't know exactly where to point it or what to tell it to look for, just point it somewhere and let the data start to tell you, because the first time I saw it, it was like, I got goosebumps. Of course, I'm a nerd like that. But I had a client, for example, she's at this show, not in this room. I don't see her. Sue, are you here? No. So she was not only the head of records, but also the chief privacy officer. And so we were looking at this technology for records purposes, and as soon as we put it against a file share, her security hat like blew off her head. She's like, whoa, I didn't know that all this stuff was out there. And so sometimes you can be a very diligent employee and very in tune with what's going on in your organization and still find a lot of Easter eggs that aren't so pleasant. So.
And then finally, we hit on this earlier. If you really need to justify that ROI, ROT is the simplest, easiest way to do it. I guarantee you will justify an ROI in like a couple weeks with something like that.
Okay, my head is exploding.
Dana.
All right, we're done here.
Hold on, Dana. Let me bring you to the microphone.
We should have warned you at the beginning that that does happen.
Okay, for those of you behind me, I'm sorry about the leakage. It's out of my head. So I'm in a new firm and that does things a little bit differently. I'm sure everyone has this, and I've got these share drives and a DM that I know are full of discovery. You know, why would you ever put discovery in a DM? I don't know, but it exists, and it's not necessarily in a folder called discovery. And so I'm very excited about this project. But how do you look in the share and identify, oh, this belongs to, I work in a law firm, this belongs to this matter, and it really does go into the DM, let's classify it. Oh, this belongs to this matter, but this isn't our stuff. And so I really want to separate what belongs to the firm from what belongs to the client, but still classify it all so that I know where each bucket of data lives.
Can I take this one, Julie?
Of course.
If only because I had this exact conversation over breakfast. So don't feel bad. It was not a law firm, it was a professional services firm, consulting firm. Same thing though, client data. So there are, I would say, 3 ways that you can deal with that. Some easier, some harder. So the hardest way is to literally use AutoClassification to understand the content and make an assessment that it is likely to be a client document. So let's just say your client is Ford Motor Company, and there's a letterhead with Ford Motor Company, there's sales forecasts. Okay, it's pretty rare that a law firm would produce sales forecasts. So there are enough telltale signs that say this is client content. That's way 1. The second way would be if your DM, I don't know, or somebody putting it in, kept the path information on where that came from. So there's a lot of clues often in the path or the taxonomy. If you can hang on to that data, do so. If your path is blah, blah, client, matter number, great. Or from client, if you're that lucky. So the path is another trick. And then the third trick is to try and find a duplicate copy of that data, potentially in email. If you can find the hash match file in email as a recipient, then take a look at the author, and that will tell you that it was client sent. So these are some of the tricks, and you can hear me talking about, you can hear that interplay, right? You're hearing me say if something, then something, that's the rule, and then I'm using that metadata, the author, the path, the content, the body content, to plug into that rule. It's a perfect use case. Thank you. You're welcome. Ooh, more. Okay, head back in. All right.
You have 9 minutes.
Uh-oh. We were
Something
on
like
to the
that.
maturity, so this is the end, actually.
It is the end. Let me check.
So this is really you.
It's me? Oh, gosh, okay.
Well, because it's that maturity model, she wrote it.
Is anybody in here using the maturity model or have used it in the past? Yeah, I love it. I use it all the time. I wish we would change the name of the generally accepted record keeping principles because the word record keeping is not only too long, but just evokes such negative connotation with anybody who's not in our choir. Anyway, because it really does talk about information governance, like those principles together constitute what IG should include. But so how mature your organization is around information governance is going to impact your ability to be successful in adopting these kinds of technologies. Do you have an information governance team person or responsibility? I would imagine if you're in this room, you probably do. You may not have a team, but it might be you. Do you have the IG basics in place? Do you know what your system architecture looks like? Do you know what applications exist in your organization that you're using? And it doesn't necessarily have to be things just behind your firewall and on premises, things you're using in the cloud as well. Do you have information management policies, retention schedules, legal hold, e-discovery procedures, data privacy and security controls? If not, those are some of the things that you'll want to get in place or start to get in place before you can start to really achieve the value of these technologies. Now, the other side of that coin is maybe you can use these technologies to generate investment in those kinds of things to justify, to say, look, we really do have a lot of data challenges. I don't have any people. I am only one person. I can only do so much. But here's the risk to the organization that's represented by the data that we do have. Can we invest in more bodies, more technology, whatever it might be?
I'll just toss out, there are plenty of experts and consultants who'd be happy to help you. If you really only have a limited budget, I strongly recommend you engage with one of them, maybe even if it's just for one day, because it can really help you set the stage for maybe next time there's a budget discussion or whatever. And most people have that amount of budgetary money to get an expert to come in. So I would strongly, if you really can't afford anything, start with that.
Yeah, I mean, even if like Dana's question was a great question, and I'm sure many of you in the room have a similar question related to your own organization, but you're not sure what to do with it because you've not used the technology before, consider asking someone like a Sandy or on her team or someone like them to come in and talk to you and help you articulate what your challenge and opportunity is and how you can turn that into a business case that you can get your executives to buy into. You know, we're crazy evangelists for all of this stuff. I know anybody can call me anytime. I think I'm on the internet. You all can find me. But the reason I do this is to help organizations do what they do better. And so if, you know, I can help any of you do that, just let me know. Well, that's it.
Ta-da.
We still have some time, I think.
Thank you.
5 minutes. If
We're
anybody-
happy to answer questions, like
anybody has more
other,
questions?
either very practical or high level, whatever you got. Any question? There's one, yeah? Oh, well, Julie will come to you. I'm too lazy. I'll make her walk.
I would just like to acknowledge you both for presenting so beautifully with such disruption. Thanks.
Oh, thank you.
That's very
Please
sweet.
fill out the thing.
Any questions, other compliments? We'll take those all
Julie,
day.
there's one behind you too.
Just a quick comment on the ROI part. You're going to fall down a bit of a rabbit hole with that, and I would recommend engaging people who are involved in the technology purchase and know the cost structures and what's been planned ahead and what's been purchased already, perhaps, because some of that cost savings can get lost because the dollars already got spent.
Yeah, so like on the ROT side, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the ROI on ROT can be difficult. Agreed, because your organization may have actually already paid for a certain level of storage, and you can't turn the faucet off. It's not like a faucet, right? We turn it on, water comes out, we turn it off, and it stops. And we don't have to pay for more. Sometimes you've already just paid for a bucket of water, and you can't stop it. So super important to understand how your organization procures this kind of stuff, how soon they can get it off your books, whether or not it's depreciable, I mean, all that kind of stuff as well from the finance side. Great point. Great point. Yeah.
I wonder what are the software applications for auto classification currently on the market, and if you have any recommendations.
I can't make any in the room, but you certainly are welcome to talk with me, with Sandy. As Sandy said in the beginning, Sandy is the president and CEO of Valora Technologies that does offer technology in the auto classification space, so she's one you should talk to. There are others here at ARMA. Are you okay if I throw out a name?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so Active Navigation is another one that does some similar things. Stored IQ at IBM. Nuix, if you have that already as an e-discovery tool, can be potentially used for this kind of thing. There are a lot of technologies that can do similar things, but your mileage is going to vary. Some are better at the processing, uncovering the details. Some are better at the tagging. Some are better at the rules part. And some, frankly, don't do rules at all. So, great question. If you want more than that, just come see us kind of directly. Look, I have a double mic.
In terms of SharePoint in particular, all right, the challenge of capturing the presentation layer, because it is incredibly crucial with sales. So the crazy people who put the birthday calendars and the pictures of the countries, and in my case, out on the presentation layer of SharePoint. I captured the URLs, right, and matched the libraries to the URL. But getting that presentation layer, all I could do was PDF the page, and without any kind of extraction. And I feel it's very important because
Well, it's part of the context for sure.
Absolutely, when a salesperson lands on a SharePoint page, what is the story that they're seeing?
Bless you.
Yeah. So if there's anybody who has any suggestions about how to capture those pages.
There are technologies actually that will help you capture their web content oriented, but perhaps can be used for SharePoint.
It's very difficult. Other than PDFing it, it's just incredibly difficult.
Right, so banks have this problem a lot.
That's what, yeah.
Right, so I have like a calculator on my homepage, and a customer, a mortgage prospect uses my calculator and says, hey, I'm going to go get a mortgage from these people because it looks great. Right, but same concept, right? So the bank has an obligation to capture what that, way back, exactly.
And
Yeah.
there is,
Similar conceptually from a technology perspective.
Exactly, and that's something that is, I think is a big gap. you know.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think, Sandy?
Thank
Thank you for that.
At that point, I mean, my recommendation is go through the API and suck it out, but, you know, you may have tried that, so I don't know.
Cool. Anybody else? Oh, yeah, okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you
You
all.
have one? Oh, yes, so this presentation is on the website and the app, so you can download the slides at will. All right, thank you. Thanks, y'all. Thanks, y'all. All y'all have a great day now.
Thank you. Hi. Oh, I'm on a, it's strapped to my dress, pardon me.
It's a reality show. Do you want
Julie, come to her, somebody turned me off.
I'm going to unhook you,
Thank you.
and I'm going to hand yourself to you.
Thank you.
And then you can,
There we
I'm
go.
sorry, dear.